Hello everybody, and welcome back to a new lesser known history video. Today we are going to be talking about the country of Bulgaria and its involvement in the two world wars. Here's a little background about Bulgaria going into the First World War. So Bulgaria had re-emerged as a semi-autonomous state after the signing of the Treaty of San Stefano in 1878 following the Russo-Turkish War. The treaty established an autonomous Christian Bulgarian principality that was allowed to have a standing army. So while on paper it was part of the Ottoman Empire, it was a de facto independent state, and it pretty much had its own foreign policy, economy, military forces, government. It was just part of the Ottoman Empire in name only, and this state pursued better relations with the Russian Empire and some of the other smaller Balkan areas. However, it should be known that it's not necessarily because they wanted to be fully aligned with them, as much as the whole "the enemy of my enemy is my friend" doctrine kind of took over, because they had claimed much of the territory that their neighbors such as the Greeks, the Serbians, the Romanians, the Albanians all had control of. Bulgaria achieved its total independence in 1908 and fought two extremely bloody wars in the Balkans, the First and Second Balkan War. And following the devastation and defeat after the Second Balkan War, the country was devastated and had a strong sense of irredentism. So, three things. The First Balkan War occurs, Bulgaria takes over a large swath of land, as well as Serbia and Greece and Albania and Montenegro. All these areas get large portions of land from the Ottoman Empire. In fact, Bulgaria nearly drove all the way to Constantinople and nearly took it over, but they were stopped at Adrianople. However, Bulgaria's allies did not allow them to take the territory that Bulgaria felt like they deserved. That was laid out for them in the Treaty of San Stefano. And because of that, they felt, betrayed. And so not even a year later, they go and declare the Second Balkan War on their neighbors. So they fought Greece and Serbia together, and they were doing pretty good, except for the fact that they had to deploy every single military unit that they could. And then out of nowhere, Romania invades, and the same thing with the Ottoman Empire. So they kind of get attacked from all sides. And Turkey re-annexes Adrianople, Romania takes Dobruja, Serbia takes a lot of land out in the west, such as Vardar, Macedonia, and then Greece is able to annex Thessaloniki, which is in western Macedonia. And so because of that, Bulgaria just loses a ton of land that they felt like they were entitled to. And so that's how you have this strong sense of irredentism in the country. So in World War I, they entered under the promise of not only reclaiming their lost land, but also gaining new territory. And as you can see in the picture down below, you can see that they had an army that moved into Romania, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but they mostly fought in Greece and most notably in Serbia. So they entered the war on October 14th, 1915, and they invaded Serbia with two armies numbering a combined 300,000 men, and Serbia collapses extremely quick because of the Germans and the Austro-Hungarian Empire all invading all at the same time. And so, for such a small country as Bulgaria, 300,000 men, that is a ton of individuals. So the Macedonian Front, which is in northern Greece, happened because the French and the British kind of weaseled their way into the port city of Salonika, which is now Thessaloniki in Greece. And the reason they did that was because at the time the Greek monarchy was leaning towards the Germans, and this is also the same time that Gallipoli was wrapping up. So if you look at it from the British and French perspectives, they needed an area where they could strike at both the Ottomans and the Bulgarians and, Austria-Hungary from the south, but they did not want Greece to fall in line with the Central Powers, because that would have just meant another enemy to go off and fight. And this was when they were stretched to the brink, so they could not really afford that many new enemies. And so Bulgaria launches an attack into Greek-controlled Macedonia in order to capture territory and force back the British and French. This is due because Greece enters the war on the side of the Allies. This is after Eleftherios Venizelos is able to gain power and put them align themselves with the Allies. So stalemates ensured at the front, and the Bulgarians built trenches. So what that means is the Bulgarians and the French and the British, they fight, and then eventually they dig in trenches up there in the mountains. And because of that, you find a stalemate just like the Western Front. Now, unlike the Western Front, the Bulgarian trenches were actually some of the most well-kept and best supplied trenches in the war up until the American army gets there and they can really improve their situation on the Western Front. But besides that, the Bulgarian army has a very, very good trench system and very well supplied area. But the problem is that it had such low morale. I mean, the country just fought 2 wars in the prior. They lose their big one, the Second Balkan War. They don't like it. They're mad about that. And then they are forced to go to another war. And it's just so many people being pulled away. It stretches the economy, and there was just so low morale. And so it collapsed following a massive Entente attack in May of 1918. And because of that, it kind of forces them out of the war. Now, the Romanian Campaign happens very briefly. So this is the Bulgarian Third Army. They launch an invasion to recapture the former Bulgarian land of Dobruja. And so the campaign stalled after multiple battles were inconclusive. However, once the Germans pushed into Romania, the Romanian army collapses. The Bulgarians are able to just push forward and capture the territory that they had lost during the Balkan Wars. So it's very simple. It's not really too big of a deal. Between the two wars, there was lots of political instability. There is both frequent fascist and communist revolts going on within the Bulgarian state. Multiple governments collapse. Some are a little more successful than others. The Great Depression occurs, which also doesn't help. And so it still was very prevalent during this time. So Tsar Boris III tried and did his best to balance all these pressures to keep the country from breaking up, collapsing, and falling into anarchy. However, we're going to see what happens. So all of this leads to a very volatile situation where the Bulgarian state really cannot align itself too closely to either of the main groups. So what I mean by that is, the communists are very sympathetic to the Soviet Union, and if Tsar Boris wants to keep control of his government, it'd be within his best interest to not ally himself with the Soviet Union, so that way the Communist Party there doesn't get too much power. Likewise with allying himself with Germany at the time. They did not want fascism to rise so much to where that could break out and overthrow the government. And he didn't want to ally himself too easily with the Allies because that would make both the fascists and the communists mad. So he was in a very unenviable position. So in the end of the day, because he was getting pretty much threatened under the table with invasion, they joined the Axis on March 1st, 1941. Germany insisted that they join to allow for the invasion of Greece, and as soon as this treaty is signed, German troops flow through Bulgaria, they cross the Danube and get ready for the invasion of Yugoslavia and Greece. So they did not participate in the conquest of those two countries, but then they did occupy and administer the areas that they claimed once that all happened, once those countries fell. And this also includes Dobruja from Romania, which is given to them during the Second Vienna Award. So it's practiced widespread Bulgarization policies in Macedonia and Western Thrace. And what that involved in was, teaching them only Bulgarian, teaching them Bulgarian culture. And because of that time, the Bulgarian state really thought that, those were Bulgarians that lived there, and they just didn't really know it yet. And so you can still find some people that think that same way. And I'm not trying to attack people for that. I'm just telling you the context of how this occurs. So the army did not invade the Soviet Union and actually did not declare war against the Soviets because they didn't want that enemy. And they regarded against the Allied landings in Greece, prevented Turkey from joining the war. And so that was what they were meant to do. So that way the Allies couldn't land in Greece, and that way Turkey wouldn't get, antsy about joining the war because the Bulgarian nation had its army already mobilized and could hit Adrianople and then Istanbul. So they also mostly fought anti-Axis partisan groups within the Balkan area. So their troops were mostly used for garrisons. The government was overthrown when the Soviets invaded the nation. So what happens is that as the Soviets push through Romania, an already weak government, because of Tsar Boris III's death and then his son Simeon taking the throne, who was too young, so they enter this regency. And so the Soviets are able to use that instability, and as they get closer, the communists rise up, and then the Soviets invade, and it's just all overthrown, and everything is thrown into chaos. A Soviet-backed coup occurs, and subsequently Bulgaria declares war on Germany. The Bulgarian First Army of 130,000 men then drove northwards into Hungary and Austria. And in total, Bulgaria mobilized a total of 435,000 men in World War II and gave up all territory gained except for southern Dobruja following its defeat. And you can see all the territory it gained down there. Anything highlighted in green or dash marked in green, that's all area that Bulgaria controlled at one point during the Second World War. And so they mobilized 435,000 men, which is a huge number. A huge number when taking into consideration how small of a country it really is. It is astounding how many people Bulgaria was able to mobilize. And yeah, that is it. That is a very brief overview of what Bulgaria did in the 2 world wars. It's not very in-depth, and eventually I do want to go more in-depth, talk about the Balkan Wars, and talk about the first 2 world wars, but this was just a brief overview, so that way people could get an idea of what did Bulgaria contribute to these 2 conflicts, because so many people forget that Bulgaria was even involved in these 2 world wars. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. As you guys know, I am so thankful for all the support you guys have given me. And as of recently, we've hit 445 subscribers. It is such an awesome thing to see all the support, and I'm truly grateful for that. I apologize for the lack of videos as of recently, because I've just been so busy, and I've also been laying the groundwork for some huge things that will hopefully start to bear fruit later in the year. I can't really talk too much about it right now, but if what I have planned and have prepped is able to follow through and actually work, we'll be seeing a ton of fun and awesome things here. So if you guys haven't already, hit the like button and hit the subscribe button to show your support for the channel. Leave a comment down below, helps with the algorithm. And make sure you guys have turned on notifications, because I understand not a lot of people get the notifications of when I upload a video. And so that would really help. So thank you guys once again, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a nice day.